Can your camera record in 10 bits? Can your camera shoot 8K? Can your camera do 240 frames per second? Can your camera survive extreme weathers? These are just some of the millions of questions we ask when comparing cameras. And while it is exciting to learn what new boundaries cameras are breaking, does it sometimes feel we spend more time learning about technology than learning about how to tell stories with the cameras we buy? That made me wonder. How does our DSLR, our cell phone camera, our camera gathering dust in the closet that we've sworn isn't professional enough to shoot with, how do these cameras compare with what directors from previous generations had to work with, especially when they were first starting out? Initially, I felt confident I knew a good deal of what film cameras were like, only to soon fall flat on my back. Directors, including Christopher Nolan and Tarantino, both shot their first feature on 16mm cameras. Nolan said he filmed his first feature following over the course of a year, shooting one day each weekend. And because it was shot with practically no budget, he decided to film it in black and white so he could hide as much as possible the budgetary constraints he faced. Tarantino, like Nolan, also filmed his first movie on the weekends, working minimum wage jobs that paid $3.35 an hour to eventually pay what was an estimated $5,000 production. With little resources and experience, Tarantino calls to making up his first feature film his film school. The lesson learned here is both work with what they had. One shot in black and white so he could mask as much as possible his constraints, while the other embraces lack of knowledge to just try, knowing that in the end he would at least learn. Can you imagine Tarantino and Nolan saying, even though I have access to a 60mm camera, I'm gonna save up to have access to a 35mm camera because it has better resolution. Don't fall for that trap. Many directors would go on to make their first movie on film. Here are some of the most interesting aspects I learned of what it was like to film on these vintage cameras. The first being a lack of an external monitor, a feature we take today for granted. Sofia Coppola said she was terrified of what came out of her first cut. Though this of course wasn't the main reason for her dilemma, can you imagine having to shoot your first feature without an external monitor? The second major highlight was the restriction directors had when it came to ISO. You see, each film stock has one single ISO, so if you want a higher or lower ISO, you had to buy a different film stock. And film stock was not cheap. While I couldn't find exact numbers for what film stock costed back in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, one website from a cinematographer states that enough film stock to film an 11-minute sequence in 16mm costs $197, and to film 11 minutes in 35mm costs a whopping $792. I gotta say, that alone made me kiss twice my entry-level DSLR. Cameras were also loud and heavy. The 60mm Oricon that Tarantino used had a weight of nearly 100 pounds, and many cameras of that time were limited to filming no more than 50 frames per second. Fortunately, technology has opened the door to being able to access cameras that can shoot a movie at a much lower cost, while also giving us tools that directors would have only dreamt of having back then. It inspires me to see filmmakers taking it even further, many choosing to just use their iPhone to shoot their feature. Take Tangerine for example, a movie that would go on to be selected at Sundance and win numerous awards. That movie was filmed on an iPhone 5S. And while you might think this drive to use an iPhone to film is limited to new or resource-constrained directors, the fact is that even famous directors such as one of my personal favorites, Park Chan-wook, who made Oldboy, he shot on an iPhone, making his short film Nightfish with an iPhone 4. I repeat, iPhone 4. These are just some of the many films that were shot on an iPhone that would go on to have success. There's even a film festival exclusively for movies that were shot on an iPhone, in case you always want to make one. I'll leave the link below. So let's see what Janusz Kaminski, Steven Spielberg's DP since 1993, has to say about cameras.
These pictures, we're using the Cook 10-to-1?
I don't really remember, you know. That's not my, I don't really think of, I look at camera as a sewing machine. So when you do thing, when you talk to the wardrobe designer, you don't ask her what kind of sewing machine do you use, because it's a sewing machine. It pulls down. It doesn't really matter, The equipment, all that stuff, it's not, what you do with it is essential, but not necessarily, the type of a light and stuff.
So while I'm not suggesting at all we stop wanting expensive cameras or caring about what specs they have to offer, what I am saying is, next time you set out to make a movie, remember that great movies have to do far less with the camera than what they have to do with the story and the creativity of those behind the camera. So go make your movie. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please leave a big thumbs up and subscribe. More on the way about filmmaking, photography, and screenplay writing. Thank you.
I can hold any note. road longer than you.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No,
Yes,
you
I
can't. Yes, you can.